Hello everybody, I'm going to do just a quick video taking the classical guitar piece Adelita and breaking down the chords here, not just in terms of what the chords are, but sort of connecting them to standard chord shapes that you know. This piece is fairly simple harmonically, but I find a lot of times that people have trouble connecting the sort of chord shapes they see in classical guitar pieces with the basic chord shapes that they know and harmony that they know. So I'll get right into it. I'm assuming here that you already know how to play this piece. I'll play the sort of first half of the minor part, the first part, right? So at the beginning, this kind of goes. Right, so that's the first phrase. So the first chord that we get, the bass, on the bass here we have an E, right? So, right, this is really the first chord that we get. You can think of the bass E is still ringing, and then we get that. This one is fairly simple. This is just an E minor chord, right? So we can think of this shape here as the sort of bottom half of the A minor shape, right? So this would be A minor. If you play that up here too, this is a standard A minor chord, right? Moving this up all the way here, from here we get E minor chord. We have, this note here is E, which you can connect to, this is the ninth fret of the G string. You can easily find that it's an E by matching it to the open string down there. That's a simple E minor triad. If you were to play the entire chord on the entire guitar, you would get this, right? Which again is the A minor shape moved up 7 frets. Right? So this, we move up the A minor and we get that, right? So this next chord is a bit harder to figure out. Okay, so this has an A on the bass, right? Like that. Now there are some different ways of thinking about this chord, but right, these are the basic notes that we have. Sometimes when I'm trying to figure out a chord like this, I find it good to sort of rearrange the notes. Because remember, you can rearrange the notes from, pick the notes from different octaves and it will still be the same chord, right? So this, notice if I take this A and go there, okay, I get, right, so rather than having the A in this lower octave, I put it up to this octave, and now I get that, right, which is a simple A minor triad. But then I also have this up here, right, so like that. This note here is an F sharp, right? So really I could take this whole chord, keeping the A bass, and translate it down here, right? So this is a regular A minor shape, and I also have that F sharp on top, okay? This is sort of one way to think about this, is this is like a 4-chord, a modified 4-chord, right? We have that unexpected F sharp there, which would make it a, would make it a 6. But the more standard way to think about this is that this is actually a 2-chord with the F sharp as the root, okay? As you're going to see, that ends up to not make too much of a difference, right? Functionally, we have a basic sort of 1, 4, 5 chord progression here. 1, 2, 5 is like a modified version of that, right? So if we think of this as an F sharp chord, this would be the chord that we get, right? Okay, so this chord here has an F sharp on the bass, and then a flat 5, and then a minor 3rd, and a minor 7, like this, okay? We can call this a half diminished chord, or a minor chord with a flat 5. So notice here though, what I was saying is it turns out to not matter too much because this chord fully contains an A minor chord, right? So if I sort of don't play this F sharp here, those are the notes I have, and that is just an A minor chord that's inverted, right, with the C on the bass, right? So, in terms of the actual notes, an A minor chord with an F sharp added contains all the same notes as a F sharp half diminished chord, right, or an F sharp minor with a flat 5, right? And functionally, they also sort of do the same thing. So like that. And then, right, so this is fairly, you know, again, self-explanatory. Right, so this is just a B major chord, right? Right, again, we can analyze this chord as, you know, as if every note here is part of the chord, or we can just say it's that added on top of, you know, this note, which is a G, added on top of a B major chord, which is just a regular 5, right? So what we're doing here, this is just arpeggiating to get back up here, right? So right, and the chord that we're arpeggiating there is E minor, right? Now let me show you a sort of very simplified way that you can do this melody, and you're going to see how these chords work, right? So I'll try to sort of whistle the melody here. So right? So you can sort of accompany this melody with these very simple it's basically a 1-2-5 chord progression, right? Played with standard chords down here. You could even do this really with an A minor. Like that, right? The second half of this minor part is essentially the same thing. So right, the difference being that it, you know, it resolves back down here, right? Now this chord here is again just a simple E minor chord, right? Like that. If you sort of try to think about how this chord shape makes sense, this is how I think about it. So if I were to take this E, which is actually the root note of the chord, and take it down an octave, right, I would end up here, right? So now I would get this shape, which is just a simple minor triad shape. You know, it can take up a bit of a stretch to sort of duplicate that octave on top, but really this is the same chord shape as the standard C major chord shape, right? So that's C major, that would be C minor, right? And then when we move it up here, we get E minor, except I'm not playing that bass, I'm playing the root note on the top part, okay? So now I'm gonna do the same thing for the second part of this, which is major. So let's let's just look at this part first. So here, this is again a fairly obvious major chord. This shape here is the standard D major shape, right? Just moved up, you know, a whole step, which gets us to E major, right? We can also think of this as, you know, if I were to sort of continue it downward, that's a full E major chord, right? Like that. This full E major chord is the same shape as the C major chord, right? But moved up 2 whole steps, and moved up a major third. So this is basically just an A major, right? So again, we started at the 1 and then we went to the 4, right? So we have A on the bass. If I were to move this, you know, take this and move it up an octave, I'm gonna get that, which is a simple major triad, and that would be the entire chord, basically E major shape, right? So this chord here, This one can be hard to interpret a little bit, but we can think of this again as a F sharp chord, right? So this note here, this is F sharp, right? If this note here is F sharp, that's on the G string, we have the minor 7 of that, right? And then here we have the 5, right? So that's what we get, right? This, if you take this note up here and move it down an octave, this chord kind of becomes like that, right? This is missing the minor third, so it's sort of missing the thing that makes it minor, right? But it has the 7, so we can think of it as a sort of simplification, right, of this chord, right? So again, right? I'm sort of adding those notes there, and then like that, right? This here, again, is a fairly obvious B major chord, which in this case is the 5, right? So again, what's happening here is rather than, it's the same idea, but we have, rather than a 1-4-5, we're doing a 1-2-5. Like that. And the 2 that we're using, which is F sharp, essentially like a F sharp minor or F sharp minor 7 chord, just doesn't have the third in it, right? So the second part of this second part, the final part of the piece, so let's look at this beginning. Right, this here, this is again an E major, right, a continuation of that. So what we're doing here again, this is the 4 chord, this is the A major. So and then sliding all the way up back to G sharp. And now it goes into this different chord, right? So this chord here, this is, if we think of this as the 1, then this is the 7, right? And that's the 3. So this is basically a chord that doesn't contain the 5 note, right? So looking at what the root is, we can see that this note here is a C, right? It's one step above what the 5 would be, right? Which is a B. So like that. So this C chord is basically a 6, right? Notice here it's it goes from the 6 down into the 5 and then resolves back, right? You might notice here that this 6 is not the 6 that you would get from this major scale, right? So the E major scale does not have a C natural in it. That's the actual 6th note, right? So it's sort of a little bit of a borrowing from minor going on here, right? So this would be like that, right? That would be the basic progression.